Well, I guess I stand where the vast majority of serious economists stand, which is to say tariffs are ridiculous. It's not a good idea. It is going to just cost a lot of money, cost a lot of jobs, and it isn't really going to solve what it is that we want to solve.
Thanks for checking out Project Cargo Professionals. We talk a lot about digitalization and AI on this show, which is why I want to tell you about our sponsor, Logiswift. Logiswift makes your operations faster and simpler, managing the entire cargo lifecycle in one smart platform. With real end-to-end visibility, you can adapt quickly when things change. Built for Project Cargo, it's now even more powerful with its new AI feature. Check out logiswift.com to take your supply chain to the next level, or message me directly and I'll connect you with Ziad, Khan and the team. Now to the show. Dennis, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Luke. How are you?
Good. Good to see you in Houston.
And good to see you.
Dennis, tell us how you got into logistics in the first place.
Well, I was trying to get into the U.S. Diplomatic Corps, and I had taken the written test and was waiting to be invited to Washington for the in-person test. And that takes a while. Could be 12, could be 36 months, and I needed money. So I started applying for jobs, and I was hired by Schenker, principally because I had studied Chinese and they had some work in China. I think that was the primary reason I was brought on board. And I started working at Schenker and just fell in love with it. And pretty soon I was doing project logistics instead of making chemical bills of lading, which is how I started. And doing project logistics, traveling around the world. Back then, we traveled in business class on what were called AD 75 tickets. So the forwarders got paid 25% of the business class fare. In the case of Schenker, it was always on Lufthansa. So wherever in the world I went, it was via Frankfurt. But in any event, I really enjoyed traveling internationally. And so by the time I was invited to Washington, D.C., I was no longer interested in being a diplomat and being stationed in Burkina Faso or someplace stamping visas. So I stayed in logistics, stayed with Schenker, and really enjoyed the early part of my career with Schenker.
And you mentioned Schenker. You've got some big names on your CV. For those who don't know you, give us a quick overview of your background and your experience in project logistics.
Well, I started in Schenker in, I think, 1988 and stayed there for some years. New York and Philadelphia. I worked a little bit in the World Trade Center. I also did hazmat training internally within Schenker, as well as project logistics. And I was then recruited to join BDP. I wanted to do that. Schenker did seem to me to be a German company, such that the path to advancement in Schenker was somewhat limited to Germans. So it seemed a better idea to work for an American company to me. So I joined BDP and took on the role as head of projects in the U.S. and did quite a lot of power generation projects as well as chemical projects for BDP for a number of years. I did eventually move to China for BDP. I didn't move to China for Schenker because shortly after I was hired, the Tiananmen Square incident happened, and projects in China were basically put on hold or canceled. So there was no posting in China for Schenker. But in BDP, I did go to Asia to run projects within Asia.
When was that?
I want to say 99. I think it was about 1999 to about 2002, something like that. They wanted me to go to Singapore because that was the regional headquarters for BDP in Asia, and I pushed back and said, no, Shanghai is where I need to be because that's where all the work is. So rather than flying from Singapore to Shanghai every Sunday night or Monday morning, I didn't have to do that. I just went down to Singapore when I had to have internal meetings or whatever. And Shanghai was a much nicer place for me. Lots of people like Singapore. I'm not one of them. I really like Shanghai much more.
Why?
I just like China. I just have an affinity for China. I just think it has a special special. The people are great. I just like China better. It seems more real to me than Singapore, which seems a bit on the fake side. Too clean.
Yeah, not as rough around the edges.
Not as rough around the edges. I like a little bit of rough around the edges, I suppose. Anyway, I've always had an affinity for China, so.
Yeah. And as well as your career, if we go back a bit, your studies have also taken you around the world. I'm quite jealous or impressed by your study record. How did you end up at so many places studying?
Well, interestingly, when I was in high school, I was terrible in languages. And when I went to university, it was condition of attending was that I study languages immediately. So I started with French, mostly just because it fit the schedule. But after the first year of university, I studied a summer in France. And I got to where I was getting pretty good at French. And then I did a year abroad in Glasgow. That was an exchange such that I paid the university in Virginia. So I paid like I was attending really an exchange. I was attending university, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, but I went to the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow and really loved Glasgow. During that period, I went down to Paris off and on, saw friends, and then I did come back to the U.S. in the summer just to make money, but because the summertime jobs were paying better in the U.S. than they were in Europe at that time. So, but then I went back again to Europe and finished the Diplôme de langue française at l'Alliance Française in Paris. And and then later after I finished university and I was thinking about the diplomatic corps, I got a scholarship to study Chinese at Taiwan National Normal University in Taipei. And so I studied, this was paid studies and a stipend for living. It wasn't very much for living. So for travels and beer money, I taught English on the side as well.
But great experience.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and really spent a lot. I loved Taiwan. Spent a lot of time in China as well. Went down to Hong Kong. I never got a resident visa in Taiwan because you had to apply back then anyway. You had to apply for permission to leave, and I just didn't like that idea. And so I left every 3 months to Hong Kong or Macau or someplace not super far away. Went up into China, backpacking and such. So it was great.
And I think I read Bogota as well. Did you study in Colombia?
It was after I finished a period at Pan Projects, Panalpina. I had a non-compete contract, and I think it was 3 months. And for the first month, I did some home projects and fixed some things. And then September came, and I got bored with that. So decided to go down to Bogota to study Spanish.
Right. And you've recently had a move. You've joined DT Project America. For those who don't know, tell us a bit about that company and what you're doing there.
So I'm the managing director for DT Project America in the United States. We are a hyper-customer-focused logistics company, project logistics, but with a strong emphasis on domestic trucking. We have a separate asset-based trucking entity called Southwest Transportation. We also have some very large and busy warehouses in South Carolina in the Charleston area. Head office is Atlanta, and we're going to be building the office in Houston. So those three places. DT Project America is a subsidiary of DT Project, which is a French part of the Demotrans group. So Demotrans has a number of entities in logistics, including freight forwarding, general forwarding, DT Project, which is project forwarding, customs brokerage, and other domestic trucking and transport assets in Europe.
So it sounds like DT has a strong domestic focus. Are you still involved in international projects, or has that changed now with your new role?
No, we're definitely still involved in international projects. We have an ocean and an air international team. We have those two teams. We have a separate truck brokerage division and a separate asset-based trucking company, and then warehousing is another product within our group. So we also have a key warehouse group. And each one of those operates somewhat independently, but if we have an ocean freight shipment that involves trucking and warehousing, it might be, if it's run by the ocean team, then the ocean team takes the lead. If it's a trucking customer who needs assistance with ocean freight, the trucking team takes the lead, and the ocean freight team supports similarly with air freight and warehousing.
Right. And there's obviously a lot happening in the US at the moment, particularly around tariffs and trade wars. And there are at least two schools of thought on whether the tariffs are a good idea. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I guess I stand where I think the vast majority of serious economists stand, which is to say tariffs are ridiculous. It's not a good idea. It is going to just cost a lot of money, cost a lot of jobs, and it isn't really going to solve what it is that we want to solve. A limited use of tariffs might not be such a terrible idea, but waking up in Thursday morning and finding that the president thinks that the former president of Brazil, who's being prosecuted for crimes in Brazil, we assume, I don't know anything about his situation, but the Brazilians do, and putting tariffs on Brazil because they're prosecuting a former president is, of course, ridiculous. And everything about this administration is, I think, pretty ridiculous.
So you're not on the fence then?
I'm not on the fence, no. No. And I mean, like I said, I don't have a problem with certain limited use of tariffs. We've done that for a long time, and it's sure, that's fine. Use tariffs for certain things, but just throwing them around, depending on the mood of the president during a particular day, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think it's disruptive and harmful to the economy of the United States. And I think the vast majority of serious economists feel the same way. So who thinks they're a good idea? I'm not really sure. I haven't seen any compelling arguments about that, at least not from an economist.
So where do you see the case for tariffs?
Well, there might be a case, for example, where we don't want China to make certain. We may not want them to manufacture certain things which would benefit them from a military standpoint, and so we want to limit that. That may make sense. We want to make microchips in the United States, so we actually funded the construction of microchip plants. It wasn't really just through tariffs. There are cases where you want to develop things. We want shipbuilding, so you could do some things around that too. But just throwing around tariffs on a whim doesn't make a lot of sense to me. No.
And given DT's domestic focus, does that mean you're protected, or is there any mitigation against that, or are you feeling the disruption as much as everybody else?
I think we'll feel the disruption as much as anyone else. Perhaps not quite as much, but we'll feel it as much as everyone else. And I don't think anyone's felt it too much just yet. You see now, I think in Nebraska, there's some serious problems because China's canceled an order of soybeans, and a lot of the tax revenues for the farm labor, a lot of the tax revenues of Nebraska were from farm labor who are being deported and no longer therefore paying domestic taxes.
Right.
And so Nebraska will have some serious problems, and there's going to be a lot of other economic problems. I think I saw something where someone put yellow stickies on the prices of things at Walmart showing what they would be without the tariffs. And consumers are going to be paying a lot more money for basic things. So it's really going to hurt consumers, and it's going to hurt the middle and lower classes a lot more than it will hurt the more wealthy in our country. So, I think it's terrible.
Are you starting to feel that already?
I haven't noticed it, but I think other people might. I'm not a big consumer. It's part of the problem. I mean, we're a consumer focused economy, and that's part of the problem, really. So you put tariffs on things so people don't buy them, but but it is that economic activity that drives our growth. So,
and it's not that easy to just turn on domestic manufacturing.
Certainly not for the sorts of things like shipbuilding will take years. Microchips, I think that was funded 6-8 years ago, still being constructed, the Intel plant. It doesn't happen overnight, no. And a coordinated approach in certain cases might be a good idea, but by that I mean a really coordinated approach, not Bolsonaro in Brazil is being prosecuted, so we're going to now have tariffs on Brazilian products. That makes zero sense.
And how are your customers reacting to all these changes?
I think everybody's just trying to go with the flow, trying to understand what the changes might be. We're not even sure. One day it's this, one day it's that, so who knows?
Have you had any horror stories yet with your customers?
I have seen a case where cargo was shipped and the tariffs were announced and raised the import price of the products very significantly. So we're talking almost $1 million in tariffs. Serious problem. Yeah, you can put the things in a trade zone, duty free for a year or so, but they were needed. They were about to be used in a project. And in this particular case, the company who was importing them on a delivered duty paid basis, so they had to pay the duties. Yeah, so I have seen some cases, and it's the sort of product that it hasn't been manufactured in the United States for many years. Big heavy tanks. I mean, there are some manufacturing of heavy tanks, but it's hard to be competitive in that. I remember Neuter Fabricators in St. Louis was a big one. It's not there anymore.
What are you hearing about the ports? Because I saw there were mixed reports about whether there's really a slowdown in volumes. What are you hearing?
I don't see a significant slowdown in volumes. If we start significantly taxing ships built in China going to specific ports, then we're going to have some disruption. But so far I haven't seen that much. I think the breakbulk industry breakbulk shipping has been holding fairly steady. It seems like there's still a need for super heavy lifts to book a few months in advance, not just at the last moment, which to me means that the ships are being booked. They are not being replaced significantly. So the ships that are being retired, there are new ships coming into the market. But unlike the container industry, where a lot of container ships have been built in the last years, the breakbulk ships have the fleet size has remained fairly steady, and I think that's helpful to the breakbulk shipping industry as well. So the rates aren't exactly tanking as they've done in the past.
One area that you're more positive about is nuclear. What's behind that optimism, and where do you see the opportunities for the project forwarding sector?
It seems like the micro nuclear or the small nuclear project industry is starting to develop and might have a future. It certainly works very well in France, and French electricity is cheaper than in other countries. So I think nuclear will do well in our country in the future, as will wind and solar, which are also doing very, very well. Texas is number one in wind in the United States, by the way. So I think that'll continue as well, with or without government support.
And offshore?
Offshore wind, I think, is going to take a little bit more time, but we'll see. I'm not sure about that. There was a lot of enthusiasm about offshore wind in the northeast of the U.S. and even floating wind, which floating wind is a difficult industry. I think we'll probably follow Europe, and let's see it develop in Europe more so than in North America.
In the past, you've talked about how shippers are increasingly going direct to carriers in North America. How's that situation now? And do you think LSPs are becoming even more important again with all this disruption?
Well, I think I don't think it's changed all that much. I think there are certain shippers who will continue to go directly to ocean carriers, large EPCs in particular. Some of them like to do it that way. I think project logistics, project forwarders play a very, very important role. I think in many cases, if the shipper isn't really doing chartering full time every day, all day, they're not keeping up necessarily with all of the fleets and all of the changes in the fleets and smaller carriers, and the ability to find a ship and on a short notice when something changes is. But project forwarders definitely still play a role in that. I think really in the maybe in the 90s, there some of the forwarders were taking advantage of the shippers and charging, higher margins than they perhaps should have done, and that's one of the reasons why you see shippers bringing that back in house. So I think there's a way for both goals to be achieved.
And are there any other trends or developments you think people should be watching more closely?
Well, I think the tariffs is the big one. That's really the important thing. Let's see how that impacts our industry. No, I'm not sure about other changes. It seems, I think trans-border trade in North America has always been very important, and the extent to which tariff changes will impact that is important as well. So.
As you look back, obviously you're still a young man, but tell us your career highlights so far.
I'm not sure what my career highlight was. I mean, I really enjoyed my time in Asia, and work that I've done in Asia and traveling around the world. It's always been great. I've been to Turkey many times, and I really enjoy going there as well. And but from a career standpoint, I think the Pan Projects Chevron Wheatstone project was a really big one. So we won that project, and it was worth but the contract was pretty significant. And I think I ended up leaving Panalpina. I could see that the company was going to be sold, so I left Pan Projects, and the project continued. It went on for another 6 years or so after I left, quite successfully. I think changes in module fabrication yards throughout Asia, and it was a very, very big project. I can remember back in those days, mega projects were big, and there were a lot of them. And I can remember winning what I thought was a small one for $25 million contract. Now today would be a really, really big one, but back then it was relatively small in the grand scheme of mega projects anyway. So,
and on the flip side, the low light or any tough moments?
No, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, there have been, I guess, minor cargo damages. I recall a particular case where when I first moved out to Asia, I had a heavy lift vessel. I can't remember whether it was Charleston or Savannah, but it was one of those two ports going to Singapore. And I went down to Singapore from Shanghai to watch it discharged, and it wasn't on the ship. I had a bill of lading for it. But it was still on the pier in the U.S. That was kind of a low light. The project needed it, and it took another 6 weeks to get it to Singapore, give or take. So obviously a carrier error, but mistakes happen.
And what do you like doing outside of work?
Well, I try to stay fit. I like cycling and running and swimming. So I do those things. I play the drums, so I play music off and on. I think I mentioned to you before that I was playing in a band, but then I got kicked out because I traveled too much. So I can't really commit a lot of time to it. So it's just something I do here and there. And I like to spend time with friends, cooking, barbecue.
We're recording these episodes in the run-up to Breakbulk Americas, the anniversary coming up this year. What topics do you think will be dominating the conversations this year?
I think the tariffs will be a topic that is worth discussing, but one has to be careful. I think you don't want to have a political debate at Breakbulk Americas. In my view, but the impact of tariffs is something worth discussing. Whether or not we're going to have taxes on Chinese ships, that's an important a topic for discussion.
I've seen you at the shows for many years. Tell us why it's been so important for you to participate in Breakbulk and what you've got out of it.
Well, networking is, I think, maybe first and foremost. I think it's a really great networking opportunity, meeting people, seeing new people in the industry, watching companies grow. I enjoy the speaking sessions and hearing what people have to say, what they think about the industry, what they're talking about. So I spend a lot of my time there just because I think that's important. I think it's grown over the years. It was really, really small in the beginning, and
You've been going for a long time.
I've been going for a while, yeah. I don't recall whether it was the first ones, but late 80s, I suppose, early 90s, back when it was in the Sonesta Hotel in New Orleans, and was maybe 200, 300, 400 people or something like that. I can remember leaving the speaking sessions a little bit before they were over, so I could queue up and or maybe even get in the phone booth before anyone else. And back in those days, we didn't have mobile phones, so you wanted to call back to the office, you had to do it on a pay phone with a calling card and pressing 25 or so digits into the telephone to make that phone call or series of phone calls. And back then it was pretty small, so it's really, really, really grown. Europe, of course, was 300 people, 400 people the first year. Maybe we expected 300 and we got 550 or something like that. So and that was when it was in the Hilton, and then it moved to the Antwerp Expo, and then moved on after that, and it's really, really grown.
And I was telling you the other day, the Dubai event is really growing as well. That's another one to watch.
Yep. I've not been to Dubai. I did go to Singapore a couple of times, and then they moved it to Shanghai. And although I love Shanghai, I didn't really want to go to Breakbulk when it was in Shanghai. I just didn't have occasion to get there. So, but it's moving back to Asia, which I think is great, and it's really grown.
Just a couple of quick fire questions for the end. Somebody's just arrived in Houston for Breakbulk Americas. Your top tip for food or drink in Houston?
There's lots of places to eat dinner nearby. I suppose it depends where you're coming from. Mexican food is always good in Houston.
I like cuchara.
I like a good dive bar. So Warren's is a dive bar on Market Square that's pretty good. And Nutsuwa, which is Houston spelled backwards, is a really special place as well on Main Street. So those are a little bit farther away from the convention center, but worth checking out.
So people might catch you in one of those bars one night.
No, probably not. Probably be at home after the Breakbulk, or going to a party to say hello to some people early in the evening, and then heading home. Yeah.
If you weren't in logistics, you'd be...
Well, I was going to be a diplomat, and I could have done that, and maybe I would have done that. I probably would have ended up having to quit over policy disputes or something over the years, so I'm not sure about that. Always like teaching as well, so I could be a teacher.
What would you teach?
I'm not sure. Global studies, I think. I think that's what I'm most interested in, is just global studies. It's particularly important, I think, in the U.S., because the U.S. is a somewhat insular country where people don't seem to have the same knowledge of the outside world as they would in other smaller countries closer to other countries. You know, the U.S. is geographically somewhat separated as well.
Well, Dennis, it was good to see you. Thanks
you too,
very
Luke.
much for your time.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you at the event.
Likewise.
Hi, it's Leslie Meredith with the Breakbulk team, and welcome to Voices of Breakbulk Americas, produced by the Project Cargo Professionals podcast to help us celebrate the 35th anniversary of Breakbulk Americas. Enjoy the show and register now so that you can join us in Houston this fall, September 30th through October 2nd for Breakbulk Americas.